All right.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the November 10th, 2022 WCCTA Board Meeting. The time is now 6:31. Meeting is called to order, and we have the roll call, please.
Norma Martinez Rubin.
I think that might have been my name, kind of went in and out here. Thank you.
Maureen Toms,
Here.
Tom Hansen,
Here.
Deanna Bailey,
Here.
Aleda Adreno Chavez,
Here.
Chris Kelly.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris usually has a flag somewhere in the background. Chris, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Somewhere in the background. Okay.
He has one behind her there.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I think we have to do roll call approval, I think.
I move approve to the agenda.
Okay.
Oh, second.
Okay, so moved by Adreno Chavez, seconded Martinez Rubin. May we have a roll call?
Norma Martinez Rubin,
Yes.
Maureen Toms,
Yes.
Tom Hansen,
Yes.
Deanna Bailey,
Yes.
Aleda Adreno Chavez,
Aye.
and Chris Kelly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is public communications. This is the time for members of the public to bring up with the board of directors matters of general interest that are not on the agenda. Do you have any public comments at this or communication?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Do you have a motion to approve the consent calendar, or would anyone like to pull an item on the agenda on the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Martinez Rubin, seconded by Toms. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Norma Martinez Rubin,
Yes.
Maureen Toms,
Yes.
Tom Hansen,
Yes.
Deanna Bailey,
Yes.
Aleda Adreno Chavez.
I have a question. I was not in attendance of the September 14th meeting. Shall I abstain, or would that make a problem right now with the quorum?
You don't need to abstain. You can just,
Oh,
it's okay that you were not there.
okay, then I don't need to abstain. Rob, is that what okay. Well, they are approved then.
Last person, Chris Kelly.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so that passes. The next item on the agenda is item 1.6. This is adoption of a resolution. Oh, hang on. That was part of the consent calendar. I apologize. Next item on the agenda is 2.0, items for board action and discussion. The first one is 2.1, which is a presentation and discussion of fiscal year 22 operating data report. May we have the staff's presentation, please?
Yes, sir. So there is a staff report in your packet, but I'm actually going to ask Deborah Harris, our finance manager, to present this item.
Hey, good evening, Deborah.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, good evening. And this is for, is everyone fine? This is for the financial, I think it's the year-end finance. Okay, and we're talking, this is for the year-end audit, yes?
No, this is the, thank you, Deborah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so for the 10Q, this is for fiscal year 21-22 that just ended. As you can see, under the operating data, operating expenses, we did pretty good in terms of how much we budgeted and how much we spend, with 0 remaining. In line 2, where we have the vehicle maintenance, we have about 6% remaining. that we did not use based on what was budgeted. And then for the non-vehicle maintenance, we came close to what we budgeted, what the budgeted amount was for, with a little bit of about 18% remaining. And going down to line 5, under the financial operating expenses, where we have the total expenses, we have 3% remaining compared to what the budgeted amount was. And then if you looked under the operating expenses, the labor and fringe benefits line, we underspent a little bit, over 50%. We have about 71% remaining. And that may have been done with the staff changes that took place in fiscal year 2021. There were a few months where we had no one in the finance office. For the labor in line 6, we have a remaining of 15%. Fuel and lubrications, we spent about 76%, with 24% remaining. Tires and tubes, we spent about 72%, which we got pretty close to what was budgeted for as well. In terms of utilities, came pretty close with the rise of gas and all the other expenses associated with that. We have 9% that was underspent. Purchase transportation, we were underspent by 22%. And then for casualty and liability, we actually had 0. So we kind of met the budget there. Leasing rentals underspent by 7% as well. And then we came pretty close in terms of what we got in interest and expenses for with 1% underspent. And going down to revenues, non-operating and operating, line 21 for fare box, the year-to-date actual was 998. What we budgeted for was 824,000. So we had nothing remaining. I think we overspent there. And non-fare box, it's the same issue. We budgeted 75, a little over 75. We spent 97. And then for the sales tax by other agencies, we're over probably about over 17,000 or 1,700, sorry. And then sales tax, but directly levied by operator. Under line 25, we have TDA, where we received 2.6. Haven't spent much in that for last fiscal year. SC operating is the same, we received 1.2. RM2, same, we haven't spent anything. We received most of those funds in the beginning of this fiscal year, actually. And for the FTA, which is, these are the federal grants, we received 2.8, but we spent 3.4, so we overspent by 18%. Federal, state, and local non-operated funds, we didn't really spend anything. Total revenue, which is lines 21 through 30, we budgeted 14,036,672, and then what we spent was 14,036. So we overspent by, we have 2% remaining, sorry. And then in line 32, where we have the net surplus, and this is what we'll be returning to MTC. It's the 1,448,000. In prior year, we returned 1,388,000. And in line 34, the operating data, we budgeted 463,860, and we actually spent 430,138. So we have 7% remaining. Total passengers in fiscal year 21 was 554,090. And in the actual that we actually have for the end of the year was 533,271. So we're a little bit about 4% down there. In terms of revenue for vehicle miles, we budgeted 1.4 million, but we actually came out at the end of the fiscal year with a little bit over 1.3. And then for employees, these are full-time employees, hours based on all the quarters and the fare box ratio. We ended the year at 7.9. where we budgeted 6.4.
I think the important line is the line 32, which shows the net surplus. So line 32 is basically the difference between our operating or our total expenses and the revenues that we received throughout the entire year. So it's the difference between the revenues we received on line 31 and our total expenses on line 5. So we ended the year with a surplus of just under 1.5 million based on our budgeted numbers.
Okay, thank you, Rob, and thank you, Deborah. I met with Rob earlier. I didn't ask if he could bring this up as a slide, so we all be looking at the same document. So I see us all kind of scrolling. Rob, if you have that capacity, that'd be great. In the meantime, this is just an information-only item. So if there's any questions from the board, we'll take them. Yes, Director Thomas.
Yeah, I just had one request is the column that says remaining. It would be helpful if you just put a percentage remaining so that I know that that number is a percentage.
Sure.
And that's the only request. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Thomas. Any other questions from the board? Yes. Director Martinez-Rubin.
Thank you. I'm looking for an instance where you overspent, and to ask the question about where then do you not make up, but where do you obtain the funds that you need? It's good to see that overall in the budget there's a surplus. Is there a certain percentage within for any line item, Rob, where you have funds for the same kind of expense, so that at year end, when you notice that there was an was kept overspent, nonetheless the funds were available? Does that make sense? Not sure
It does, yeah. I think the only line item that really applies to is line, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the slide as well, but line 13, which is the purchase transportation. So the funding is not an issue in the sense that, you know, all of the revenues that we receive are eligible to be spent in pretty much every category we have. So it really is the overall line, the final line item that's the important one. But you know, we do want to be fiscally responsible in how we budget and do a good job in budgeting. And I will say that the difference in the purchase transportation is two issues, well, not issues, but two reasons. One, when we did the budget, we did not fully anticipate the cost of the one-seat ride program that we operate with other agencies. And so that was not actually included in the adopted budget. And I think there was also a rounding error that, I hate to blame someone who's not here, but that Charlie did when he pulled those, when we put that number together. We were using the way that MV bill us, which is basically the purchase transportation line item. They send us we pay in advance. So we pay 1 month in advance. And so we get a pre-bill and then we get a reconcile at the end of the month. And I think the number that we used to calculate the budget line item was based on the amount that we were prepaying rather than what we were actually paying in the month. So it kind of balances out, but that's why there is a slight discrepancy in that line item. I think that's the only real item that addresses what you kind of brought up. Every other line item, we were pretty far under budget on a number of these items.
So if I'm understanding correctly, for that particular line item, 13, purchase transportation, it was not a situation where WCCT did not have the funds to pay because you prepaid. So then upon seeing this report, you would always have to offer that explanation for understand that, right? Otherwise we see, overspend. And it begs the question of how did you actually
Yeah.
pay?
I agree with that, Norma, Director Roman. And also, wouldn't this actually the remaining be a negative number?
I think that's just the way this form calculates out. I mean,
Oh,
there's a standard form that we actually, as part of our documents, we present to NTC. So it's a form that we've kind of done in this format for, a long number of years.
right.
So
It's a
you're
little bit
saying that
confusing. It's a little bit confusing for us, for, I mean, if you really think, I mean, how it balances out and everything, maybe a footnote or something.
Sure, and we can certainly. I mean, this shouldn't be an issue going forward. As I say, that I mean, it
You're
should be
muted.
an issue. We should always have positive numbers remaining in all of the line items. 1 through 18, and that's it should be positive.
Well, thank you for the explanation. And I suppose just for archiving purposes or so, who would probably want to dig up some other backup information to understand what that means. The point being, WSCAT had the funds to pay. There's a prepayment system, and that's fine. And overall, there's balances, which is the good news.
I think we can just do a better job of explaining it in a staff report next time it does come up again. I mean, I think.
Thank you. Okay.
Fair comments.
Okay, thank you, Director Martinez-Rubin. I think I had heard some comments from Director Adriano Chavez. Was there more questions and follow-up?
No, I'm just agreeing to what Director Rubin said.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this information item? Okay, so hearing none, we'll move forward to the next item, which is 2.2. And that is a presentation and discussion on WCCTA's audited financial statements for year ending June 30th, 2022. And we have the staff report.
So again, there is a staff report in your packet. I'd like to introduce David Albury, who is here from our audit team who conducted the audit. I think he's going to give a presentation and an overview. We did bring this item to the F&A committee 2 weeks ago. I just gave myself, Yvonne, and Deborah gave the presentation then, so that the F&A committee do have some background. And then before I ask David to give a presentation, I would just like to say, it was a really good process working with the team. It was a brand new audit team, brand new finance team on our side, and so there was quite a lot of back and forth of just double checking things and going over the way some of the procedures. But overall, it was a really positive experience. I think our staff learned a lot from David and the whole process. So, just express our appreciation to that, and then let David give a presentation.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, members of the board. My name is David Alvey. I'm a CPA. I'm an audit partner at Mason Associates, and we are the authority's independent external auditor. And really what that means is my job is to report to you of things that we found during the audit and to render an opinion on the financial statements. And although, the audit kind of comes to the end with the issuance of the report, it really starts at the beginning of the year. And so that was July 1st, 2021. So we have to look at the internal controls when we're doing our audit testing from that date to the date of our opinion to make sure that there's proper segregation of duties, proper internal controls, to rely on the balances. And then we come and we look at, once the books are closed, at those balances to make sure that they're accurate. And in the report, technically, the only piece of this that my firm owns is the audit opinion. And I'm pleased to say it's an unmodified or a clean opinion. And that's the highest level of assurance that a CPA firm can give. So congratulations, you passed your audit. And what that really means is that we believe, in my firm's opinion, and based on the test work of our audit process, that the financials that you have in front of you are accurate and free from material misstatement. We also have issued the memorandum on internal controls, and this is also known as a management letter. And this is my firm's communication to this board of things that we found during the audit. And those can be categorized into 3 ways: a material weakness, a significant deficiency, or a other matters. And I'll start with the other matters. So the other matters are just informational, upcoming government accounting standards board pronouncements that'll be happening over the next couple of years, just to keep you up to date what's coming down the road. We had no significant deficiencies, but we did have some material weaknesses, and it really was because of the turnover in the finance department and the lack of having a second individual to review some of the key processes. So we really focused in on the journal entry process that we would, I mean, it was due to staffing issues, that we need a second person to review those journal entries and approve them. And then the also thing that we keyed in is bank reconciliations. The bank reconciliations were really behind, and they weren't being reviewed timely. And that's just a key function, that those have to be done timely and reviewed, not only for just to make sure that there's nothing erroneous going through those in terms of like checks being issued, but also after a couple of months, the banks tend to not be so lenient in terms of crediting you for any kind of errors or fraud. The second half of the memorandum on internal controls is called the required communication. And these are standards that I have to tell you. So I had no issue, my firm had no issues with management's accounting estimates. So accounting estimates for depreciation or pension assumptions. We had no difficulties in doing the audit. We don't think management was, shopping for an opinion. They had another audit firm ready to go if they didn't like our opinion. And we had no disagreements with management. We don't think management was trying to limit the scope or the access of our audit. And with that, I'd just like to thank Deborah and Yvonne for all their help. It's always difficult when you have new auditors come in, and our style is just a little bit different. And so I think it worked well, and you've got a great team with you there.
Thank you. So does staff want to make any additional comments? You just want to take some questions from the board? And looks like we have Director Martinez Rubin has her hand raised.
I think maybe just one comment is, if you don't mind, just the fact we accepted the findings that the material weaknesses, and I think we already addressed those. To put better controls in place, procedures. I think that's something else that we really learned through the process. Was we developed some new procedures, new policies. We put them in place, and kind of implemented them immediately. I think we really took on board the advice that David and his team could kind of give us to kind of make any improvements that we could.
Okay, and I will say that the Finance and Administration F&A Committee did review this information with Rob a week ago, I think, so, or maybe 2 weeks ago. So we did have to take a look at that before it was brought to the full board. And then Director Martinez Rubin.
Yeah, no comment. Thank you, Deborah and Yvonne. I don't see Yvonne on the screen, but thank you to Yvonne and of course Rob for getting all the documentation needed by the auditor. So, Mr. Alvey, you opened a possibility of a question. You said your approach is different or distinct. So I was curious what you meant by that.
Each firm has a different kind of method for doing the audits. We at my firm, Mays and Associates, we focus truly on internal controls, not purely on internal controls, but we weigh internal controls very important to make sure that there's segregation of duties, that not one person can initiate, authorize, and post a transaction without somebody else looking at it. And so that's why a lot of those comments that we had in our, and as Rob and I failed to mention, that they have been implemented. And if you look at the management's response, you'll see that they've been implemented, those controls, and then we'll be testing those next year. But we want to make sure that there's segregation of duties along the way. And so that's why we kind of keyed in on those journal entry processes and those bank reconciliation processes.
Thanks for that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure staff now will make sure that they attend to that as best as possible. And it's like the most difficult part is probably now in place for them to things will be easier as they progress through the year, especially with more timely posting and everything else we have to do. Yes.
Yep.
Thank
And,
you.
and on that note, we actually look back at the prior year comments next year when we do our for June 30, 2023, and we have to show that as a current status of prior year current matter of prior year material weaknesses in the report for next year. So you'll see an update that they're being implemented, and we address that if they're not.
Well, guidance, I think, is welcomed. I think staff are jumping in together, and they're relatively new working with each other. So this is a good approach to test out how well that happens, and then administratively and financially how well that shows up. So thank you all.
Thank you, Director Martinez-Rubin. Any other questions from the board? Okay, well, this is another information. It's just to receive the information. So thank you to our auditing partner, and then as well as to staff. As Director Martinez-Rubin said, this has been a lot of changes going on. So it's good that we got this done and we're able to do so successfully. If there's no other questions there, we'll move on to item 2.3, which is discussion and presentation of draft fiscal year 22 WestCat short-range transit plan.
Thank you. So I'll take this one. So there is a staff report and also the short-range transit plan in your documents. I do know that it's kind of been a busy few weeks for a number of you, so I'm hoping you've had a chance to review the documents. If not, it's something we can talk about at the end, and we can bring this back again next month to get into any more details. But I do want to go through some of the higher level parts of the documents, and then we can maybe have discussion and some questions at the end. This is the draft report. MTC have received the draft and they are reviewing it, and I was hoping to get some comments and feedback back by now, but I have not. And one of the reasons why I have not is also the reason why we did not discuss this at the F&A committee 2 weeks ago. I submitted the original draft at the start of the month, and then as I was about to send the original draft out to the F&A committee, I decided to basically rewrite the entire document because I didn't kind of like how it was. So that's the reason why it's kind of late going to MTC and late going to the F&A committee. But if I kind of just go over some of the substance of this and some of the context for the short-range transit plan, I think the reasons why we did it are outlined in the staff report. It's a requirement of our receiving funding, federal funding, that we do this document. I think in this case, it's important to focus on the narrative that is included in the document and some of the ideas and approaches, some of the questions and issues that I tried to kind of bring up as part of the document as kind of potential issues that the board are going to have to discuss, look at as we develop a service plan, because this document is not a service plan, which a short-range transit plan normally is. We were given a set of scenarios and specific funding levels by MTC to come up with different ways we may approach different amounts of fundings that we will receive in the future. And the way that the funding was presented to us by MTC, it was based on FY19 funding levels and FY19 costs to the agency. And one of the significant things that is going to kind of, I try and mention a number of times through the documents, is that in FY20, we went out to a brand new contract with MV for our operations and maintenance, and our costs increased at that time. So it's really difficult to then go back to look at FY19 and have those revenues escalated and try and work within our new cost kind of constraints and cost structure. So that's why I say that the narrative is more important than the actual numbers that are contained in the document, because I think the narrative will explain the story a little bit better than the numbers do. So if I go through kind of the different sections of the documents, just at a fairly high level, but the sections 1 and 2 of the documents are an overview of the agency. You know, it's kind of some of it's the standard boilerplate that we always talk about in terms of who we are and how we operate and what kind of service we provide. And then it does go into some of the details of our service levels and how we operated pre-pandemic. And I think one of the things that is worth noting in this section is even back pre-pandemic, we were talking about driver shortages. So I think, again, it's something that I've tried to highlight throughout the documents on a number of talking points, but a number of things. There's a number of 3 themes throughout the whole document that keep coming up, and driver shortages is one of them. So the third section of the document is our current service, which does try and look at, you know, how the changes that we made when the pandemic hit, the changes that we made, you know, when our revenues were a little bit uncertain and we received some federal stimulus relief money. This part of the document tries to explain some of the decisions that we made in terms of service levels at the time. We talk about span of service, and by that I mean, you know, we're still operating to try and connect to one of the earliest BART trains in the system and one of the latest BART trains in the system. We tried to keep our local service with it, you know, early runs, late runs, and tried to spread out service throughout the day. And we tried to keep the geographical coverage of our service intact. So we didn't slash entire routes, you know, we kind of made cuts across the board to kind of keep service levels at least available for people to use our service throughout the pandemic. This section again does talk about the change in the operation cost and the contract that we took on in October 2020, and then outlines the driver shortage. I think it also talks about the importance of our local service and trying to keep a lifeline level of service throughout our entire service area, which, you know, I'm not sure we ever got specific guidance from the board that was a goal, but I think as staff, that was certainly a real priority to kind of keep service intact across, you know, geographical equity coverage for our riders and have service available to people. So the 4th section of the document talks about potential future service that we may provide, and I think this is the section that will guide the board in conversations going forward when we do look at any service changes we want to make. I don't think we're looking for, there's no answers to be got tonight on any of these questions, but I just think they're things that will come back to the board. There will be conversations that we do need to have. You know, things like the importance of local service versus regional service. A lot of that will be based on, you know, ridership analysis. Certainly how the network management discussion plays out at the MTC regional kind of process. But this is also talking about potential service changes, about, you know, what services we would bring back. Would we look to change services? You know, things like microtransit a possibility in some of our service areas going forward. You know, are there other areas where the fixed route as it stands works well and we don't want to make changes? I think they're all just discussion areas that we will want to be having with the board going forward. You know, it also identifies areas like the waterfront in Hercules that doesn't have any service currently. And I think there's a number of developments in Pinole that are going to negate us having, you know, serious discussions and conversation about how we provide service around the former Doctors Hospital area and the potential developments at the Kmart site on Fitzgerald. You know, I think they're all areas that are going to be something that I wanted to include in the document, so at least they're part of our thinking kind of going forward. And then the other big one in the future is the zero emission mandate for all of our vehicles and how that's going to, you know, potentially impact service, potentially impact the number of vehicles we may need to operate. And there's also a really significant, unfunded cost to all of that prospect. So that's kind of just to trying to outline some of the discussions going forward that we will need to have. Then section 5 is the actual scenarios. And, as I say, we were given 3 scenarios to work with. And we did our best to come up with a narrative to kind of explain where we may be if these scenarios kind of came to pass. The first scenario was called robust recovery, which was basically we would return to FY19 levels of funding, which, given our cost escalations, is hard to know what that means. But I think in this section, I tried to talk about potential changes we would make to current service, how we provide it, and the potential of restoring some of our service. In this section, we talk about, restoring the JX, adding in some initial service to the waterfront. And then I think the rest of the narrative is just about potential changes we could make, going back to some of the issues in section 4, potential microtransit that could play a role. Would we need to look at how we deliver express service compared to local service? Where are the priorities going forward? I think a lot of that's to be determined, again, based on ridership numbers, based on where we're seeing the need to provide service within the community. The second scenario is basically the first scenario, but with less riders, so slightly less funding. And this scenario, I kind of talk about exactly the same issues as the first scenario, but we're probably not going to be able to add any real additional service hours or additional service on the streets. The third scenario is the real doom and gloom scenario, which is service cuts, which is I don't want to really talk too much about because I don't think it's at this point I don't think it's hard to get into a discussion on where we may want to cut service when we're not in a position that we need to be thinking about that right now. But I think just those initial thoughts contained in the document just to have in the back of the board's mind. So as if this does become a reality, we can start having those discussions. And then the fifth section of the documents is just a discussion on our capital, on our vehicle needs, where our fleet is currently, some of the potential changes we may need to make with zero emission vehicles. This was not something MTC wanted in the document, but I thought, it's not just an MTC document, it's a WESCAP document. It's a document that the board kind of, need to buy into. And so I thought it was important to have the capital discussion in the document. And then at the very end of the document, there is, there's 2 appendixes. The first appendix is just the data associated with the first 3 scenarios. The second appendix is a 4th scenario that I decided to add in, and it's something that a number of other operators have done a version of when they've done this document. And my thinking in this was just to give how do we get back to our pre-pandemic levels of service? It's a financially unconstrained look. There's no, this is what it would cost the agency based on our current cost per hour, our contract with MV. This was what it would cost for us to ramp service back up. And again, it's dependent on driver availability. It's obviously dependent on funding, but I thought it was an important piece of the document just to show, how we would get back. And again, the whole discussion is, do we want to return to service as it was pre-pandemic, or what are the options of making changes to the service, reprioritizing, changes in express routes, local routes, new priorities. So it's all kind of just there for, so it's in a document so we can kind of refer back to it when we have a larger discussion on there. And I think the one thing that I did also mention in there is drivers' wages, because I think that's also something that we are going to have a discussion with the board in the upcoming months about, the current drivers' wages and what we might be able to do to look at those to really improve some of the work that MV are doing in terms of recruiting and retaining drivers. So, I know that's a lot, and I purposely didn't do a presentation because I wasn't quite sure how much time everyone had to look at this document at this point. But if the board so wishes, I'm happy to put a more detailed PowerPoint presentation going over some of the finer points together for the next meeting. And, again, ideally, NTC would like us to approve this document at the December meeting, but, that's completely dependent on the board's comfort level and how we want to proceed. So if this is a draft, happy to answer any questions, make any clarifications, and then just have a discussion about, what you feel about the document in its current form.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I think that the first hand that went up was from Director Adriano Chavez.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rob, for this presentation. I think the draft looks really good, and the analysis, I really like the scenario 4 reality check. Very interested in the microtransit concept. I think that's something that works very well in suburban areas. One thing that is important to note is that traffic has increased. I mean, it's basically from if we compare with the pandemic, traffic is actually increasing. However, transit ridership is not really increasing at the same level. So that's something that it would be really, really good to mention and to see how we can strategize. I really think, again, I mean, of course, as you know, before I was relying on the census information and the strong market between this area and our in the 4th Street industrial area in Berkeley, by the Amtrak BART station. I think this is very promising. There's a lot of employment there. Another area that is very important is, and I think it has shown, is the shuttle to the Contra Costa College from areas that do not have access to transit. Like before the C-Cubed, students from Rodeo and also from Pinole, who didn't have, in Hercules, who didn't have a vehicle, had to make 3 transfers to go to college. And that was ridiculous for less than 10 miles, So thanks to the C-Cube, we have only 1 ride. And maybe 2 transfers for people who don't live along the alignment. But another area that might be interested in, and I think Charlie explored it before, was a coordinated transfer with County Connection to go to the Diablo Valley College, because a lot of our youth here goes to that college in not to Contra Costa College. So that's one thing. So strategies to see why traffic is increasing at the higher level and why they're not taking transit. I can tell you because I take BART all the time, and it's about 30% capacity. I mean, only 30% from what it was before. 30-40, I would say at the most. And I imagine I haven't taken Westcott, but I wanted to do it during the summer. It didn't concretize because of some problems that I had. But I usually ride my bike in the summer, taking Westcott and bicycle all the way to Oakland. So just congratulations on this. I think it's very promising, and just basically adding those things, maybe or consider those things. I don't know, you have more data available there. I'm just basically is a plain observation and relying on previous information.
Thank you, Director Adriano Chavez. Councilmember Director Kelly.
Thank you very much. Rob, I have to agree with Aleda. I think microtransit is really, really intriguing. And I know that Tri-Delta has tried it. And before we've thought about it, but as ridership becomes sort of younger, more people are getting used to those kinds of services. And I know in some of our areas, we have these long fixed route bus routes that go around during the middle of the day. I mean, when the school children are going to school, they have a lot of ridership, but during the middle of the day, there may be like almost nobody. Could it be possible to look into microtransit during those hours? You know, and asking our drivers to do that, because that might be more efficient and faster. So I think that would be something to explore. The second thing I would say is, you know, I keep an eye on, and I ask everybody I know, you know, who's going back to work full time. And for all of our knowledge workers here in the Bay Area, people are generally going back 2 to 3 days a week. They're not going back 5 days a week. And so I think we have to take that into consideration. I did see one of my residents in Hercules the other day. He was going on the Lynx. He says, wow, the Lynx is, you know, almost full now. That may be the case, you know, on certain days, but certainly probably not every day, you know, so we just have to take that into account. But I think we have to spend some time, I mean, maybe a year, to see what's really going to happen post-pandemic. So, you know, that would be important. So it's a good report. I'd like to take more of a look at it. And then, Rob, I just have one sort of unrelated question, if you could answer. I've noticed that there's these little white vans, I guess they're the dial-a-rides that are going around, and they look awfully cute. Can they take wheelchairs, passengers?
Do you
They're
mean,
like little shuttles or little small vans.
is it the one with the Westcat logo on?
Yeah,
That's actually a supervisor vehicle, but yes, it can take wheelchairs. I believe that vehicle only has capacity for one wheelchair.
mm-hmm.
Myself and
Rob Petty says too.
so, but and then myself and Rob Perry were at a conference last week looking at various options for potential future vehicle purchases, and there's definitely a few other smaller shuttles out there that, you know, you get 2 or 3 wheelchairs in that have potential that we're looking at. And
Yeah, I would just put in a pitch, because my mom was in this situation many, many years ago where she was in a wheelchair. And if we could have a vehicle that could take a wheelchair for like a dial-a-ride, you know, just for one person, maybe 2, to like go to the doctor or go here and there. You could call it up kind of like a try my ride, a microtransit. That might be really attractive to an aging population. So just give that some thought. Thank you.
Could just make one comment about the microtransit, because I think it is something that we've started to have some very initial conversations with. And there's a couple of different solutions out there. There's some software solutions that I don't think are right for, you know, our agency right now, but I think there's some more full service microtransit options that, you know, certainly people that we're going to have conversations with. And we had a very initial conversation with some of the MV partners and some of the MV employees about having a larger conversation about that going forward. So, you know, I'd say there's some areas of the service area where it does seem to make some sense to at least explore it and see what it might be able to provide.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Director Martinez-Rubin. Oh, I think
Thank
the hand
you.
down.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
To some degree, I'm going to follow up with something Director Kelly said, and also because I was at a senior living community ribbon cutting today, so it just brought it that much closer to me, where a situation was described to me, and I consider it an opportunity to explore further that market, writers who would use something like the dial-a-ride or a version of that, because, and correct me here, Westcat's service area goes only so far, but beyond that are the medical services, like the Kaiser in Richmond, for example, that's some residents at the particular facility where I was are members of. And so there's that extra vehicle that they have to take and consider in their scheduling of their day. So I'm wondering if part of, if not for this report, for a similar future report or maybe an addendum mentioning that the potential for that market, given that we got various senior living living residences or communities. That's the case in Pinole. I don't know about Hercules, but we also have additional to the future housing developments that you mentioned, Rob, in Pinole. There's going to be that senior housing on San Pablo Avenue. And so that's another indication of how other entities, businesses usually, have really gone the route of exploring the demographics and the potential markets that there are for their projects. And similarly, in the public sector and transportation, there is that ongoing, there could be that ongoing provision of services that would that would be supported because of the aging population. Further, we also have the centers where there are appointments to be had up to 3 times a week. I'm thinking of the dialysis centers that are located in Pinole, in El Sobrante, in San Pablo. You know, we see them popping up all over, and exploring potential relationships with those private entities. I don't know, there are probably regulations associated with that. But again, there's that possible mix of private public partnership to address a transportation need, because it is not fully addressed. It's just not available. I mean, we might expect people to contact Uber and whatever else, but we're talking about a population that barely feels comfortable with having a device in their hand, let alone using it. So that's a reality for that group of folks of a certain age. And so I'm just putting in that plug for having our own agency think about that opposite end of the age spectrum, where we have a good number of folks in our region, you know, entering that age and finding themselves also even less mobile because they have to give up their own vehicles. I mean, that's a good thing, but for them, it's a loss of independence. And I think we're also wanting to help fortify that sense of independence to the extent possible. So thank you.
And if I could just respond to that, just to, you know, so we do have our paratransit data ride system that operates, as you say, within our service area, but we do actually expand to some of the medical centers, certainly in San Pablo and some areas in Richmond along San Pablo Avenue. So we kind of do go a little bit beyond our service area for those exact reasons, so they don't have to make that transfer. And then the other thing worth mentioning is the one-seat ride that we actually operate with Connection, Tri-Delta and LAVTA currently. We are in discussion with East Bay Paratransit to kind of expand that within the rest of Contra Costa, maybe not throughout, you know, maybe not beyond that, but certainly to El Cerrito, San Pablo and Richmond. So that's kind of that we are looking to do, which would also improve that mobility and that ability to get to, you know, medical appointments or to get where people need to go. So certainly, you know, the comments are well taken, and, you know, they are certainly part of the overall process that we're kind of working through.
Super. So then I'm just reiterating or having you emphasize that, because it is a reality out here. One more thing, you mentioned lifeline services. Tell me a little bit more what that means.
That just basically means an important service to the community. I mean, it doesn't really mean anything other than it's important that we operate those kind of services. So, for instance, our service out to Martinez on our 30Z route, you know, doesn't have great ridership, but it's important to have that service in place. So it's just a terminology. I would consider that a lifeline service. You know, it's service that in reality, it's not very productive. And, you know, if the goal of the agency was just ridership and productivity, we would probably not operate that route, but it has a value to the community.
And I took it literally because, again, we're talking about this population that needs to access services which are distant to where they live. It is most definitely a lifeline. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Director Martinez Rubin, Director Ardino Chavez, and then I see Director Hanson has his hand raised as well.
Yeah, I just want to ask Rob, when shall we comment on this document on the short-range transit plan? And if we do, when is the deadline to submit comments to you, or is that what you're asking, or not at this meeting? I mean, we're receiving comments at this meeting, but maybe, because I would like to read it more carefully too.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning on the fact that we'll just bring this item back in December as a draft again, and then I'll incorporate some of these changes that have been mentioned tonight, any other comments that people have. So I think by the next board meeting, ideally, if we could get comments back, and then we can talk about it again, and then I'll bring a final version to the board in January for adoption.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Director Hansen.
Hey, Rob, one thing maybe to consider is that we do approve it next month. Then how about bringing back like sections one time per meeting and just talk about that one section, your ID behind it. The board can ask questions about that one section, and then the next meeting we talk about another section. That way the board could get comfortable with it and understand what you're thinking, and then we can understand what the plan is, but talk about it like one piece at a time so it's easier to digest.
My only concern with this is NTC actually have a pretty strict deadline of January 1st to have the final version approved.
Well, I'm saying, yeah, go ahead and prove it in December, but
Okay.
then come back and just have discussion items, just kind of like the board as a free flowing kind of conversation.
Oh, certainly, yes. And I think, we could certainly incorporate that into some kind of deeper level, service analysis of potential changes. So yes, certainly we could certainly do that approach. Of bringing the individual sections of specifically the future section, having that whole discussion about where the board sees things we should explore and look into. So certainly.
Thank you, Director Hansen. I agree with the comments that were made. I guess, Rob, you're looking for some guidance for the next meeting. So I think you mentioned a PowerPoint, like an overview. I think that would probably be good for the next meeting. And then I also liked Director Hansen's idea of us getting to cover it over time. I did have a question, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this ahead of time, but the microtransit, would that's basically back to Dollaride, and I'm assuming tech would be involved, so it kind of goes towards Uber. I'd love to hear more about how about that in a future meeting, not necessarily at this moment, but in a future meeting. So when we get to those, I guess, section by section previews, I'm just curious how we keep ourselves separate from, at least in that one segment, from that other company.
Well, I think I would not propose us going down that route. I think there's actual transportation companies out there that provide a much more, specific service. And as I say, we've had initial conversations with the MB, who've partnered with some of these agencies in other areas. Right now there's a company doing a pilot project in the city of Richmond. And also the one seat ride pilot that we do is operated by a specific company that do this kind of work. So there's a lot more insurance. Drivers are approved, go through a process. So it's not. I'm certainly not proposing to go down an Uber Lyft kind of alternate. There'll be a little bit more defined than that.
Okay. Well, thank you. And then I think we have Director Toms has a question.
Yeah, just one question. Taking a look at the one seat ride ADA paratransit, can you also describe how that varies from the accessible transportation plan that's being discussed at CCTA?
I think it's part of that plan. So, we've had the pilot has been in operation for, I think we're coming up on 2 years we've been operating it. And the only reason it's still a pilot and not an actual designated service that we're going to operate full time is just working with the FDA on how we report some of that information, because it's a pretty unique concept having 4 agencies provide this service. But
Right.
It's a service that is part of the accessible transportation plan. And I know we're working closely with CCTA, with the county. That's where the potential expansion of it with East Bay Paratransit is being discussed, because I think for that to happen, there needs to be some additional funding brought to the table by, part of the Measure X, part of the accessible transportation study. So they kind of tie in, but, it's a program that's been in operation and we're trying to supplement it through that plan rather than that plan take it over, if you like. I mean, it's working well for the agencies.
Okay, and then just another question that I had, just as a user or a family member who is could be a paratransit user. On page 10 and 11, there's the fares, and it talks about the Clipper card and how the Clipper, through the Clipper card, they will know how to charge somebody. So like, does my family member who is disabled qualify through Clipper to get the discount when
Yes,
they've already done that through Westcat? In the days where you used to buy the little tabs tickets. So I'm just
Right.
curious if I
Yeah,
don't
so-
know that, then others probably don't know it as well.
Sure. So right now the Clipper system is not available on the paratransit or the dial ride system. So the process that your family member has gone through is fine for using that. If they wanted to use their actual Clipper card on the fixed route system, there is an actual eligibility process that they would qualify for, because by default there is a process to go through. And then when Clipper 2 comes online in the next couple of years, Clipper will be available on the paratransit dial ride system. And so that process will kind of, migrate to that.
Okay, and I think what I'd be interested in seeing, and if I missed it, maybe you can point to me where it is some kind of education where, I know that at the senior centers, they've done, programs, and I think it was through the WCCTA help pay for some training for seniors, but also if there's some kind of go-to place where family members of people with disabilities or seniors could get educated on how these things work.
Sure. I think, not to go back to the accessible transportation plan at the county, but I think that's a lot of what they're trying to build in that whole process of improving some of that. Because I think it's all out there, but it's not, as you say, it's not always obvious where to go. So
Right. Okay.
I think
Good. Thank you.
And Director Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. Just in response to Maureen's comment, WCCTA is starting up its travel training program again. And this is for seniors, and I'll certainly suggest to them that they include some, special needs people who could benefit from that. And, pre-pandemic, this was a really great program and got out and, took people on rides and showed them how to use transit. So maybe that could be expanded to include other people and not just seniors.
I will just say, Mika is pretty heavily involved in the travel trainer program. So, we are involved with WCCTA, and I know in the past, Mika and some of our MV staff have been out to senior centers, and it's something we've kind of discussed about, how we kind of start some of those programs back up again. So noted.
Director Hansen.
Yeah, just one comment on what Chris said. Maybe, I don't know if the plan is, but a YouTube video on the training, so it can be linked to the website, so it's always live, so somebody can just go to the website, see what the training is, and they can get going if they didn't make the in person.
That's a good idea.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think, Rob, we've kind of given some, I guess, direction about the next steps. Like it's a two-part process. It sounds like something back for December, and then some ongoing, I guess, sort of training or education for the directors. Do you have any questions or need any clarification?
No, I think say we'll bring a PowerPoint back next month, have more discussion, and then I think we'll start setting up some individual items on the future agendas. And I think I'm going towards this is the start of our greater service planning workshop that we never quite got around to doing. So I think that's the start of that process of how we look at our service going forward. So yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is 2.4, and this is an update on MB transportation staffing.
So I'm going to let Peter Edwards take this one.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. So I come with you with a lot of pride and with great pleasure to announce that MV is promoted, or Treslin Edwards, as the GM for the project here for WestCat. I've been promoted to the regional vice president position, overseeing this region. So I'll still be supporting the WestCat service and Treslin, but part of what we've always tried to do is promote from within. Treslin started with us 6-7 years ago as a driver, and he's absolutely worked his way up, road soup, dispatch, operations manager, to now he's running the show and the operation there. So I couldn't be more proud and happy to announce that to the board, that Treslin will be taking over as the GM effective immediately. So that's my official introduction, Treslin. So you might want to say a few words.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had a layer on top of that. So welcome. That's what I wanted to say. I get to my screen, there was something on top of it. So I apologize for that. So welcome, and we'd like to hear a little bit about you.
No worries. One thing, I am greatly excited, and I do appreciate the confidence in, of course, Rob and my boss, Peter, in my abilities right now, something I've been looking forward to for a long time. Like Peter said, I did start as a driver, and to be honest, this has been the ultimate goal of mine 7 years ago. So I'm really excited, like I said, just to kind of keep the ball rolling in the direction that we were heading and keep this relationship strong between MV and WestCat, of course.
Well, thank you and welcome. I'll just see if we do. Dr. Martinez-Rubin.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And please, congratulations to both of you, Peter and to Treslin, and keep up the good spirit. And something that I would ask that you keep in mind, we've not heard back from you, Peter, but I remember you thinking about the notion of promoting being a driver as a entree or into a career, a long-standing relationship as a driver, by shifting potential drivers' notions about the value of carrying human transport. I remember you commented on how, I'm paraphrasing here because I'm a lack of words, how ironic it is that the compensation for drivers that haul trash is so much greater than for drivers who transport humans. That stuck with me, and to the extent that we can somehow support that in both of your positions as a board, please don't forget that. That to me was revealing of how much importance you give to your positions, not just as a job, but as what it represents in the lives of people. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that goes to you, Treslin. Thank you.
We the whole paradigm of a driver has shifted over the last 25, 30 years. I remember when I was a young kid, when I looked at a driver, I looked at someone as a staple in the community, someone that should be respected and looked up to. And I don't think that over the last 20 years that the job has given that type of persona to the people that are coming up, and partly because of the pay. It's not attracting mature people. It's not attracting the demographic that we would want. We're responsible people that can actually make a living and a career out of it. So when we have a driver that we could see him grow and advance through the ranks in Treslin and then make it to where he is right now, it's something that we can go back to our current work staff and show that, with hard work, with a good work ethic, this is where, we can go. So I'm really proud of that. Again, it's something that I think is something we should probably be shouting as loud and as hard as we can so that everyone can see that. Along the lines of what you had mentioned about wages and that type of stuff, if you can indulge me, one of the things that I'm doing the last 2 to 3 weeks in my new position is that every location that I oversee, I would say 70% of them, we're all in the process of revamping our wage scales. We realized that coming out of the pandemic that we're in a completely different market when it comes to wages. From San Francisco all the way up to Placerville, every single operator that we do business with, we're doing a wage evaluation and realizing that our current wage scale fell way behind the times. And not only ourselves, but all of our competitors are paying more money at this point. So we want to really get back into the mix of things, be competitive in what we're doing as far as wages, so we can attract, the cream of the crop out there, people that really want to work, that can operate our vehicles safely, give good customer service. So as Rob mentioned, him and I and Trez are going to work really hard to come up with a plan, a wage scale that's competitive and that the market can really bear, and come back to you guys with some guidance as to how we can get it done.
Thank
We'll
you.
definitely hear and listen to that. Thank you both, and congratulations.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, Director Hansen.
One thing also might be helpful with that conversation is attrition. How many drivers, how fast you lose them, how often do they move on? That would be really helpful to know also.
Well, if you can indulge me for 2 minutes, I can give you like a quick, not a PowerPoint, just a graph of what we're working on, if you can allow me to do that.
Sure.
I'll share my screen really quick. Let me know when you can see it.
We
Yeah.
can see.
Are we looking at the Pinole driver wage scale here?
Yes.
So I did a analysis back in June of 2021 to all our surrounding competitors in the area. And as you can see here, this is where everyone was at that time. And this was, again, this is June of 2021. Our current seniority right here is we have about 55 drivers right now. And this is kind of the spread as to where those drivers sit in the seniority range. So it goes to show that even though our wages aren't premium, we still have a lot of drivers that are 5+ years, 4 years, that's really stuck around with us. And, our goal is to not just raise our wage scale, but to really provide these guys with, a wage that they can kind of make a living and retire on by staying with us for the long term, right? If you look here in 6/1/21, the average wage, starting wage for our competitors, we're right around 24, 22, right around in here. We're not going to be up there with Muni or Golden Gate. Those are the really big agencies, but we definitely don't want to be down here where we're really struggling to attract people. I did the same analysis roughly about 5 months ago, 6/1/2022, and look at the difference in the wages, the starting wages in all of our competitors. Everyone did a really dramatic wage increase, and it really put us where our current wages are, really put us at the bottom of the pile. Where in 2021 we were right there in the middle, and was still fairly competitive. Right now, we're at the very bottom with Tri-Delta at this point. So it's really hard to, if someone is coming across a bridge or even lives in Crockett or Pinole, it's not a big thing for them to just drive to County Connection because, look at the different wage scales. So these are the kind of things that we do from an internal standpoint to make sure that we stay competitive and know what the market is doing. What we're really proposing, and this is, again, we'll come back to you guys with this in a more detailed form, but we really think that we need to be around $26 an hour at a starting wage, and then provide that increase all the way through our wage scale, all the way for the guys that are 5 years plus, so that they're still, benefiting from their overall increases. We don't want to have a brand new driver making the same as our 15 and 20-year drivers, because they've really put in the time and definitely deserve that. So again, that's kind of what we're looking to do from a wage standpoint. Let's see how we get back out of here. I'm not sure how to back out of share my screen.
Rob, do you want to talk them through that?
If
Should
you
be-
move your cursor across the top, it should pop up and show you to stop sharing. There should be a tab.
Show grid. Yeah, I see the tab, but it didn't tell me how to stop sharing. Let's see.
Well, make sure you move your cursor because sometimes it sort of goes to sleep.
Or go to the bottom. It's either at the top or the bottom,
Blur, choose.
but you have to hover over it.
I see all these the different kind of videos, but it doesn't tell me how to stop sharing.
I know we're all giving recommendations. Whoever's the host might be able to force stop the share.
Rob, Rob Perry's the host, so I'm hoping he can.
Okay, it's okay though. I think that we can continue.
Yeah, we
have
can
it on screen.
continue.
Yeah.
I can.
So while we work on that, I guess the thing we want to say is welcome to our incoming leadership over at MD, and wish you the best in your future endeavors as you move up the chain too.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. The next item on the agenda, I think, is committee reports. So this is from the general manager. Rob?
I'm just texting the other Rob. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, sorry about that. Well,
That's okay.
Rob, will you mind if we switch this up then while you're working on that? We go to the WCCTA representative report?
Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, let's do that. So let's go to 3.2. Do we have any reports? I think Chris, maybe? Or Director Kelly?
Yeah, so just at the last WCCTA meeting, we just had a couple of things happened. Travel Safe Richmond gave an overview of their transportation program, their local road safety plan, their bicycle and ped plan, and Richmond's really making some strides there. So that was really, really great. The other thing was we got kind of some feedback on the San Pablo Avenue multimodal corridor study. This would be running through Alameda County and then into Contra Costa County up to Richmond. It stops at Richmond. And it's a proposal to possibly have bus rapid transit on San Pablo Avenue, maybe bike lanes, limiting the parking. It's kind of a monster, and Hercules and Pinole are not involved in that, but we're paying attention. And so, stay tuned. I think this item is going to come back to WCCTA in January. And several of the cities along there, Berkeley, Albany, El Cerrito, San Pablo, will have some suggestions to make. So stay tuned on that. It's complicated. Whether you have bus rapid transit running on the side or in the middle, do you really want to do that? Do you want to do something that conforms with what Alameda County is planning, which is bus rapid transit, a pilot project running on the sides? There's just a whole lot of moving parts. So that's all for now.
Thank you, Director Kelly. I think we'll go back to item 3.1, and that takes us back to our general manager.
Thank you. So I have 4 or 5 items just to go over briefly tonight. First one is the MTC, the network management discussion that has been on the Blue Ribbon Task Force and the Transformational Action Plan over the last 2 years, longer, seems like a lot longer, but last 2 years. There's a meeting on Monday of the advisory committee where the consultants are actually going to present a framework of a potential network management structure. And they have gone through their analysis and they've concluded that the best potential structure is the one that the operators kind of envisioned up, 18 months ago as part of the process. So it's very operator-led, operator, general manager, and MTC-led, with staffing to kind of oversee, to help support some of the ideas that are coming out of the proposal. The meeting on Monday is notable because it seems that the advocates are not in favor of this approach, and so I think there may be a pretty robust discussion, and there might be a lot of public comments at the already scheduled 3-hour meeting on Monday. So, as an operator, I think we're happy with the direction that the work is going. It has MTC staff level support. It certainly has, at least the commissioners that the operators have spoken to, that kind of has their support. So be interested to see how that does play out on Monday. Still a few more months of meetings to finalize how that's all going to play out. And then obviously there's the whole, how it will actually play out when it's implemented and in place. But as I say, from an operator standpoint, it's going in certainly a more favorable approach than we might have hoped for at certain points over the last couple of years. The second item is just a real brief update on something that Director Tom's kind of mentioned, is the accessible transportation study that is being done at CCTA and the county. So CCTA, as part of that process, are having discussions on potentially creating what they're calling a coordinating entity, which could also be a CTSA, which stands for Coordinated Transportation Service Agency. So it's basically CCTA looking at improving accessible transportation options in terms of coordination, in terms of some of the things, again, that were discussed earlier about having information available to people, having a one-stop call center where people can gather some of this information. Again, it's something that's really at the very initial stages. I know it's on a CCTA agenda coming up, and it's something that the operators have support of the concept for. I think that's very much fair to say. I think there's some small level of concern about funding and potential of this entity being able to utilize some of the funding that operators currently use to provide some of the paratransit and ADA services. Ongoing discussions with CCTA, I don't think it's anything to be overly concerned with. I think we're all just trying to make sure that whatever we produce at the end of the day keeps service on the street that's there now and helps improve service for seniors and disabled community. So it's just something that we'll probably be bringing back, and we'll probably ask CCTA staff to come to our board at some point in the in the coming months to present more detail on. The third item on the list is just the ongoing BART feeder bus discussion, which I don't have any real updates. We had a meeting this morning with CCTA to schedule the meeting with MTC and BART to discuss kind of the ongoing concerns over the feeder bus funds that we received from BART. So that's kind of still pending. And then as an aside, and it's because it's sort of connected, there's also conversations with BART and the City of Hercules about the BART park and ride lot in Hercules, and how that may, because that's the contract for the maintenance and operation of that site is a three-way agreement between ourselves, BART, and City Hercules, and we're kind of renegotiating some of the responsibilities for that right now. And as BART charge people to park at that facility, it potentially has overlap into the larger BART feeder bus discussion. So I just mentioned that because it may be something that comes up at the Hercules City Council before it comes up. Kind of, it's just a kind of heads up that those two areas are potentially colliding at some point in the future for a larger discussion. The next item is the remote meetings. So I know we had a pretty robust discussion a few months ago of potential options. The governor coming out a couple of days after that meeting and declaring that the declaration of emergency is going to end in February, kind of changed that whole conversation. So, you know, I think beginning March, we have to be meeting back in, you know, pretty much as we did pre-pandemic. So I think we're going to start reaching out to the City of Pinole and Pinole TV to go back, once March arrived, go back to how we've conducted board meetings as we have in the past. Until then, I think we will intend to keep on as we are until, you know, until February. Director Bailey asked me to give an update of the waterfront stop at the last meeting. So I have had some conversations with City Hercules staff about how we may start serving the potential or the new stop at the Hercules waterfront. We've had some initial conversations, and I know there's still a little bit of work to be done by the city on establishing that stop and, you know, putting a pole in the ground and making sure that turning radiuses are available. But, you know, I've given the city kind of the timetable of when we could start service and how we would do that. You know, ideally it would be when we do our next schedule change, which I'm hoping to do in February or March timeframe, of kind of maybe trying to, you know, maybe not adding any real additional service into our system, but realigning some of how we operate service right now in terms of the timetables. So that's kind of hopefully planned for the February timeframe. And then my last update is just on ridership and kind of a brief report out on the free fares that we had in the month of October. So it looks like we saw around a 15% increase in ridership on the previous month, which is kind of what you tend to expect when we do free rides. It's, you know, historically, that's what us and other operators tend to see. I think the breakdown is interesting. So the links saw around a 34% increase in ridership. And just to speak to a comment that came up earlier, it was noticeable to look at the daily ridership numbers. You know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday were significantly more riders than Monday, Tuesdays were. You know, the two times we actually got above 1,000 riders were both on Tuesdays. So it just kind of speaks to that whole when people are going back into the office. But 34% increase, you know, a lot of people took advantage of free trips in and out of the city over the month, which is good to see. Our express bus service into the bar system, we did see some increases on that. It was relatively flat. You know, we saw a 5 to 7% increase over the previous month. And then our local service saw around a 15, I think it was actually a 17% increase on the previous month. So just, you know, it's only 1 month's worth of data, but just it's interesting to see the trends on the links compared to the express, compared to the local service. So that was the free month in October. We haven't really seen any. I've seen some initial ridership numbers for November, but start of November had the rainy days, so we obviously have seen a dip in ridership, but it'll be interesting to see how many of those riders we picked up in October we can kind of keep on the system over the next few months. So I know that was a lot of different subjects, a lot of information, so I'll happily go back to any of them, go into any more detail, but that's the end of my report.
A very robust report. Thank you very much, very detailed. Any questions from the board on Rob's report? Okay, seeing none, I think we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We covered 3.2, which is the WIC Tech report, so we'll go to correspondence. Any correspondence this evening?
No correspondence.
Okay, thank you. Any board communications? Okay, seeing none. Next item is adjournment. So our next scheduled meeting will be on December 8th at 6:30. The time now is 8 p.m. Have a good evening, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.